fear in people's beings and the psychological damage. And I've responded to lots of disasters over the years, and story for another time. But the People's Republic of Boulder does things in a very different way, and you have to fit in. So, but the funny thing is, when I love the Salvation Army, they're so good about feeding. They're really great about feeding. But I say, Major, I got to tell you something. He says, "What's that, Rabbi?" I said, "When you're in the People's Republic, there's a lot of vegetarians, so you can't be serving ham and all this beef and all this meat. You got to do some vegetarian meals." He says, "Well, are eggs vegetarian? What's vegetarian?" I said, "Okay, let's start. Tuna fish, okay? No, let's try some cheese and some salads." So it was one of the only funny moments all week, but teaching the Salvation Army about dairy meals. So it is something to, when we give watching intergovernment agencies come together is amazing. And for people who love those doggies, those comfort dogs are really very powerful. To
I
be with
support
people,
them. And yeah,
a
I
lot of
do
support
a
dogs and
donation
support
every year
dogs.
for them.
You know,
Yeah. I
Have
met
any,
them on my way into a restaurant one time, and
well,
yeah, they're just those dogs just suck the negativity out right out of you.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I just said, "Give me your card," because I know it's a yeah. I just, every year I just give them what I can. Yeah.
yeah. They're really powerful. I have a great picture of myself with about a dozen of those dogs in Vegas, surrounded by them. And I tolerate dogs, but they were kind to me. So I won't get going about cats, Andrea. But so
have any of you come up with any suggestion of what drives these people? This guy may have been totally schizophrenic.
it's mental health. I think anyone who does this stuff, it's mental health issues. Besides hatred, but this is mental health. But the system is how family members don't take responsibility for family members. You know, I tell a funny story. Was it and it just illustrates. I was at the CIA one day giving a presentation, and Leon Panetta was the head of the CIA, and I'm sitting on the dais, and Leon Panetta turns to me and says, "Rabbi, look at my knuckles. They're still sore from when the nuns whacked them with a ruler." You know, and I think we've forgotten the days about. I don't believe in abuse of any kind, but sometimes we need to whack people on the knuckles when we see things that are not right. And we've given up. It's the story of the stoop moms in Philadelphia, and other communities. Stoop moms enforced the community and community norms until heroin came into South Philadelphia, North Philadelphia, and they started killing the stoop moms. So as we see really what we're talking about tonight in Seder, degradation of really not taking care of our neighbors and standing up, but his family really should have been doing things because this guy had been mentally ill for a long time. So, but you don't want to get me going because
No,
I'm still glowing in the afterglow from the baby naming. But it was you need to learn when to do your work and then step aside and come back in and be thankful I have other responders who are up there taking care of some of the stuff.
but you now realize that it's easier to buy a gun immediately in Georgia than it is to register and vote. You can buy a
Yeah.
gun and shoot someone on the same day, but now you have to register a week in advance in order to
Yeah.
vote.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that,
that's just
there you
just
go. So
stuff.
the
So
Second Amendment takes precedence over everything else.
yep. Yep. So we live in an interesting world, but I have yet to see Rabbi Zwerin. Do you have a copy of the New Reform Haggadah or Rabbi Roberts? Do you have you gotten a copy yet? I haven't. I've seen pages of it, but I haven't
I'm
opened it.
not, unfortunately, I'm not very impressed with it. So
Okay. Well, let's find a better note.
I think it came to me the other day that the essence of Judaism is horosis, because it's all symbolic from everything that you do with the service and the study and everything, until you get down to the only thing that's left is the horosis. Everybody likes it.
Yeah. I just think someone posted a great Ben and Jerry's. There's a Israeli brand Ben and Jerry's Haroset ice cream that's only available during Pesach. Have you seen it?
No.
Ah,
True. I mean, under Heckscher and everything else, and it's for Passover. Why would you want Haroset ice cream? So, whatever, So,
I would imagine my Roar ice cream wouldn't go over that big.
yeah, whatever. So, but as Reformed Jews, we celebrate a wonderful moment that we now have a Knesset member who is a Reform Israeli rabbi, which is historic.
Rotem.
We're going to be actually doing a major, not me, but a major fundraiser is going to go on to daven with him at the Knesset. And I suggested that Anat Hoffman be the Shaliach Tzibur because he can lead services where he wants in the Knesset. And we're talking about doing a fundraiser for progressive Judaism in Israel that hold the first Reform Minyan in the Knesset and it be led by Anat. That's my suggestion.
Ah, wow.
There it is. Thank you, Yoni. So,
yeah, Sandy Korn sent this to me. We'll include it in our emails moving forward, but I just figured you queued it up so well.
He's a mensch. If you ever get to meet him or study with him, just a nice guy. So, but you'll see about this minyan you're hearing the beginning, the people who are behind the scenes involved in creating it. They said, we really should do a minyan there as a fundraiser. And then I suggested that they have Anat Hoffman lead the service because I just thought that would be the cherry on top.
Oh yeah, but and you can understand that 25 Orthodox rabbis or members of the Knesset would get up and protest and storm out.
Whatever they want to do. I just hope they unplug the AED machines for
Rabbi Zwerin, good-looking file cabinet.
A good-looking what?
File cabinet.
Oh, file.
Where'd you get it?
The file cabinet over here on the right-hand side?
No.
That's the one you got off the street, Rabbi? Right, Rabbi?
Yeah, that's the one I found on the street, right. Yeah.
Did you get a receipt?
No, it's an interesting story. Before we moved in here, I was saying to myself, I had file drawers in my house, Oliver Sholem, and I didn't know where I was going to put all my files because I didn't really want to build in a desk with more files and stuff. So I said, well, maybe I ought to get a file cabinet. And I'm thinking maybe I ought to get a file cabinet. So I'm looking up these file cabinets online, and they're $400 and $500 a piece. And I'm not going to pay $500 for a file cabinet. I'll just take a bunch of boxes and stack them up and put files in them. And so I'm driving down a street I never drive down before. And as I'm driving down the street, I see this file cabinet, and it's got the word free on both sides of it. Two signs, a piece of paper on both sides, and it says free. So I drive right by it because I think to myself, I'm thinking so much about this file cabinet that looks exactly like the file cabinet I just looked up online. And so I'm imagining a file cabinet that's free in the middle of the street. And suddenly I realized that's really a file cabinet that says free on it. So I stop about 6 doors down. And I back up at 80 miles an hour and I jump out of the car to see if the drawers work, and all the drawers work and it's in perfect condition. There isn't a dent on it. So I, with great difficulty, loaded it into my car and brought it home. And there it is. And it still has the free sign on the side against the wall. So what can I tell you? That was it.
I still don't understand how the Reformed Jews are going to be able to get listened to when there's 160 other voting members of the Knesset.
120, yeah. On the one hand, it's a great system. On the other hand, it's unwieldy. You know how many parties ran for the Knesset this year?
18.
No, 38. 38 parties were registered for the Knesset. Now, obviously, you need 3.5% of the national vote to get one seat in the Knesset. That's the bottom line. If you don't get 3.5% of the vote, you can't get into the Knesset, period. So a lot of these parties, a couple of the Arab parties split off from a main Arab party formed their own, and they didn't get to the 3.5% mark. So they were now knocked out of the Knesset. And so this time, instead of 12 seats in the Knesset, the Arab parties got 10. But Bibi's got to form a cabinet. He's got to form a government. And in order to form that government, he may have to do for the first time what has never been done before. He may have to go in with the Arab parties. These are the same Arab parties that are anti-Zionist. So I don't know what he's going to do. We'll see what happens. We shall see. Anyway, today is Shabbat HaGadol, as Rabbi Kaye said, and Shabbat HaGadol is interesting. Means the Great Sabbath. It's interesting because traditionally rabbis only preach twice a year. They only preach twice a year, once on Shabbat HaGadol, once on this Sabbath, and once on Rosh Hashanah. On Rosh Hashanah, they gave a sermon about morals and values. But on Shabbat HaGadol, they gave a discursive sermon on the rules and regulations of Passover, on getting ready for Passover. And there was another tradition that on the Sabbath before the Seder, which would have been today, rabbis would also read the Haggadah in public. So one rabbi in the Middle Ages in the 1300s said that perhaps we have been misnaming this Sabbath. Maybe it should not be called Shabbat HaGadol. Maybe it should be called Shabbat Haggadah, the Sabbath of the Haggadah. And we've been somewhat perplexed as to whether it really is Shabbat HaGadol or Shabbat Haggadah. But tradition has it that it's come to be known as Shabbat HaGadol more often, and so that's the more prevalent term by which it is mentioned. And the Haftorah from Malachi for this Shabbat ends with the words, on that day, on that great day, on that Yom Gadol, on that great day, God will send Elijah the prophet to redeem the people. Something to that effect. I don't remember the exact words, but that's how the Haftorah for this morning ends from chapter 3 of Malachi. So Shabbat HaGadol. There are a half a dozen other, well, there are more than that. There are probably 7 or 8 or 9 other Sabbaths during the year that have special names. The one that most of us would be Shabbat Shuvah, the Sabbath between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the Sabbath of return. There is Shabbat Zachor, the Sabbath of remembrance, which comes just before the holiday of Purim, a month ago. And what are we remembering? We're remembering Amalek because Haman was an Amalekite. We're remembering Haman so that we can erase his name. As we've learned in previous versions of our Torah study, it is the responsibility of the Jew to remember, forget, never to forget, and never to dwell on. So always to remember and then to forget, to remember and move on, so that we never victimize ourselves or become victims of our own misfortunes. Any questions about any of the Sabbaths or There's also the Sabbath before Tisha B'Av, Shabbat Eicha. There are actually 4 Shabbatot between Purim and Passover that each have specific names based on the Torah portion. There are 7 Sabbaths. There are 3 Sabbaths between the 17th of Tammuz and Tisha B'Av that have various names. There are 7 Sabbaths following Tisha B'Av that are all taken from the book of Isaiah, and they are all called the Sabbaths of redemption. The Sabbath following Tisha B'Av is called Shabbat Nachamu, because the 40th chapter of Isaiah is read, which starts with the words, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, comfort you, my people. So the Sabbath after Tisha B'Av, the worst day of the Jewish year, the day of mourning, is called the Sabbath of comfort. So there, and there are 7 Sabbaths between the second day of Passover and Shavuot, in which during these 7 weeks you can't get married, with the exception of 3 days during those 7 weeks. You can get married on Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day between Pesach and Shavuot, and you can get married on both new moons, on Rosh Chodesh, the new moons of the 2 months of those 7 weeks. Otherwise, you can't get married. So what can I tell you? And if one of those new moons fall on Shabbat, so bingo, you can't get married that day either. So gets tougher and tougher to get married, which is why about half of the Jewish people get married in March, because they got 7 weeks in which they can't get married. And then the 3 weeks, the 17th of Tammuz to Shabbat, they get married again. So no wonder we have so few numbers. So many weeks in which you can't get married. I don't know.
I put in the chat a nice little reading from a chaplain colleague about Passover. If you're looking for a little different kind of thing to download for your Seder night.
What's that?
I'm sorry, Rabbi?
What is that to download?
If you go to the chat.
Oh, okay.
You see a PDF file? It says Passover message.
All right. Okay. So you just click on that and it will come up somewhere?
Yeah, just click on it. It's amazing, Rabbi. It's like you pick up the telephone and there's someone at the other end.
Absolutely unbelievable. It tells me it's going to save it.
It's the next version of Henry Ford. When they asked him, Mr. Ford, people want to buy a color. Buy your car in color. He said they could have it in any color they want as long as it's black. So just the same thing, right? So just click on anything on the internet.
By the way, Rabbi, speaking of marriages, happy anniversary.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I just read yesterday about putting on the Seder plate an acorn, and the acorn standing for that you walk by it and don't necessarily see it, and yet it has potential for seeds in it. But the most important thing is this rabbi made, it represents all those who are imprisoned and what is happening in the prisons today, that you literally walk by prisons and don't understand what's going on behind the walls. So I just share that one with you. I thought that was neat.
And to build upon what Rabbi Robert said, someone else suggested putting a bottle of water on your Seder plate because you can't give water to people who are standing online trying to vote and exercise their freedom. So just a lot of creative things. I mean, as I use the word liberal as Reform Jews, as liberal Jews, we're doing this in a different way than we ever imagined for a second year in a row. So we got to be creative and make your Seder meaningful.
Does that mean that if somebody came by with a big truck and parked it with bottles of water in the truck and dumped the bottles on the ground and people just went and got them, that would be like against the law?
Only, but if they had NRA endorsement, little bottles on it, then it'd be fine.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I'd be willing to go to jail to give somebody a thing of water. I've seen people faint in lines. I've almost done that myself. And the joke is, it's not legal to give grandma water in the line anymore. You can't get her a chair and you can't get her a little snack. And I'm going, this is wrong. And hand me the water, I'll pass it out. My record is clean, and yeah.
Well, but Kathy, you saw what happened to that state representative yesterday when she went to knock on the door of the governor's office while he was signing this stupid bill. And
no, I didn't.
And she taps on the door, and she was immediately, I think, assaulted by two policemen who put her in handcuffs and turned her around so that they could drag her away. She couldn't even walk away. They just dragged her backwards. And then they charged her with 2 felonies, resisting arrest and disturbing governmental process.
Wow.
Talk about talk about let's be Republicans, why don't we?
Well, the other issue is that the length of the line is inversely related to the level of income in that zip code.
Sure. Yeah.
Today, you can't say jail, big house, going up the river. You have to say it's a gated community.
A gated community indeed. Well, the other thing you could do is you could also say, when they go to arrest you for getting water in line, you could also say, oh, I didn't know I was standing in a line to vote. I thought this was the line to buy a gun.
Rabbi, there's also that
Jewish get water in a line to buy a gun, I would think.
Yeah, but Rabbi, if I didn't give that lady or that man that water, they would have died. And it's against my Jewish principles, my religion, that I have every right to practice.
One less Democrat.
Well, yeah, the Republicans are taking care of themselves on with their stuff too.
Yeah, there is such a thing as heat exhaustion and heat stroke if there's hot weather. So yeah, dehydration.
Anyway, well, we'll see what the powers, the governmental minds can do to obviate the cruelty inflicted upon half of the voters of Georgia. So let's see, today we have finally gotten to chapter 19, which means that, let's see, there are 34 chapters in Deuteronomy. That means that we have 15 chapters left to go, if my math serves me correctly. 15 chapters left to go. Good greebies. we could finish by 2025. That's really encouraging. So we're on chapter 19, verse 1. 17 and 18 were all the rules concerning kings and priests and prophets and the people worshiping false gods and demons and angels and all of the rest of that. And so now when we get to chapter 19, we're going to start by talking about murder, accidental murder, not homicide, but manslaughter. And verse 19 is sort of verse 1 is sort of the setup to verse 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So verse 1 starts, Ki yachrit Adonai Elohecha et hagoyim asher Adonai Elohecha noten lecha et artzam vayirashtem vayashavta ba'arehem ubevetehem. Oh, okay. So korate means to cut down. So when the Lord your God will cause the other nations to be cut down, those nations which the Lord your God gives you, it gives you artsam, their land. So this is not just whoever is living in the land when you get there, that's your land. That's not their land. So they are going to be driven out. Now, we read earlier that they're going to be driven out slowly so that wild animals don't come and take their place. But sooner or later, they're going to be driven out. And you're going to take over their land. Not just their land as a generic, but actually, virashtem v'yashavta ba'arehem uvatehem. You're going to inherit and you're going to dwell in their cities and in their houses. Ar is a city, or Ir is a city, and Arehem, their cities. And Bayit, in their houses, Bavatehem. So when you come into this land, which God has given you, and this is about the fourth time this has been told to us over the course of the last half a dozen chapters, you're going to dispossess them and you're going to settle the land. If the Israeli government had played it according to the biblical text, they would have long ago settled the Israeli-Palestinian problem. In 1948, after they won the War of Independence, they would have just driven everybody who wasn't Jewish out, just driven them out, which is exactly what a number of the Zionist leaders had determined to do. Drive them all out. This is our land, and get rid of them. And Ben Gurion, of course, was from the Labor Party, and he basically said, "No, we can't do that. We will make peace with all of the people who live around about us, and it will be a peaceful place, and all nations can live here." And da-dum. So, who was ultimately right is a matter for historians in the future to determine. It hasn't worked out so well for Israel up until this time, but who knows what the future will bring. And maybe the future is changing before our eyes with the Abraham Accords and the rapprochement between Israel and the Sunni nations. So we will see. And when Lebanon gets rid of Hezbollah, then you'll know maybe things really are changing. And we'll also see what happens with the Palestinian elections that are set to occur in the next couple of weeks. But those elections usually get put down a ways, and so it could be a couple of months. And since Hamas is also going to run for election in the Fatah territory, in the Palestinian territory, if Hamas, if the Brotherhood wins the election, and the next leader is as bad as the leader in Gaza, then I can tell you this is not going to be a fun 2021. We are going to have some really difficult choices for Israel to make, and for the Palestinian people to make. If they want to live under that kind of domination, that's what they're going to get. They're going to get total domination. Israel will no longer be part of the protective scheme. And Israel will then have to act immediately on establishing sovereignty over the lands that they ultimately want to have, period, end of report. And we'll see what happens. It's going to be a messy deal. So I'm not looking forward to the Palestinian election. And I am sure that Bibi is not looking forward to the 5th Israeli election in a year and a half. But that may also happen. So you're going to settle this land. You're going to take this land. It's all going to be good for you. Oh, that reminds me. I read something this week that was written by Bibi's father. Bibi and his family lived in Denver for a couple of years. And his father, Ben Sion Netanyahu, was a professor at DU. He taught history at DU, and he was a renowned scholar. He was a renowned Jewish scholar, certainly, but he was also a historian of note in general. And he wrote a book on the founding fathers of Zionism. And in this book, this is sort of apropos what we were talking about in the last couple of weeks. In this book, he writes about prognostication. And he says something to the effect that the ability to prognosticate is rampant among people of India and also among the Jewish people. Or actually, I think he said Israeli culture. So I wrote down one of his quotes. He said, prognostication is one of the abilities that man is endowed with. Foreseeing the future is nothing more than perceiving the meaning of current and ongoing processes, understanding their direction, their weight, their influence, and evaluating the outcomes of the clashes between these very processes among themselves. By properly understanding these matters, one has already touched the edges of future development. In other words, if you know what's happening and you know what forces are regnant, then you should be able to prognosticate what will happen after that. Well, yeah. Tell that to, what's the difference between prognostication and making odds? If you know a horse has won 10 times and he's running against horses he's beaten before, the odds are pretty good he's going to win. But to prognosticate that he's going to win is not a sure bet. And therefore, if he doesn't win, your ability to prognosticate is gornish, which is another way of saying you don't know what you're doing. So he finishes his little statement by saying, the idea of political Zionism in many ways can be called the beginning of a systematic prognostication that helped in building modern day Israel, capable of defending its position. He then went on to say that Herzl viewed the art of prognostication as the need of the first order because he was sure that no correct policy is possible without correctly foreseeing the future. And Jabotinsky considered this ability as a principal part of statesmanship too. Well, here's the deal. Herzl might have agreed with Ben-Gurion, but Jabotinsky never did. Jabotinsky would have said, kick them all out. You don't have to worry about them 20 years down the road. And Herzl would have said, well, can't we all be friends? As Ben-Gurion said, as Moshe Dayan said. So we shall see. That was Ben-Zion Netanyahu's statement about prognostication, that we need to be able to prognosticate based on what's happened in the past. In the Middle East, that doesn't always hold clear. So anyway, now that we've established the fact that God's going to give us all the land of Israel and kick out the nations who we shall dispossess, and we shall live in their towns and in their houses, we come to verse 2, which is a total non sequitur. I mean, it's like a totally, it's a totally different, where'd this come from kind of a thing. A total non sequitur is like out of a clear blue sky. So verse 2 says, Shalosh arim tavdil lecha. So shalosh is 3, arim are cities, tavdil, lahavdil means to make a difference or a distinction, lecha for yourself. So you should distinguish 3 cities, set them aside, pick them out. Betoch artzecha, in the midst of your land. Asher Adonai Elohecha noten lecha l'rishta. Again, we're reminded this is land we are inheriting. This is not land we are fighting for. This is land that is given to us. So the land which the Lord your God will give you to possess, of all that land, take 3 cities and separate them out. All right, so 3 cities. Now, we know ultimately there were 6 cities, but this is only talking about the 3 cities within the land of Israel on the western side of the Jordan River. So verse 3 comes along and it tells us what we're going to do with it. It says, Tachin lecha, which is sort of like prepare for yourself. Tachin lecha haderech, prepare the way. The translation, survey the distances. I'm not sure that's terribly incorrect to translate it that way, but it's essentially it says divide the land hypothetically in thirds. V'shilashta comes from the same word as shalosh. Shilashta, third it, divide it in thirds. Et gvul artsecha, or artsecha. So take the borders of the land of Israel and divide them in thirds, and you're going to basically put one of these cities in each third. Asher yanchilcha Adonai Elohecha, which the Lord it's sort of convoluted. It could have been said a whole lot easier, but Asher Yadchilcha, which the Lord your God shall cause you to give you, occupy, enable you to have, V'hayala nus shama kol rotzeach. So essentially it's saying, in each third of your land, you're going to have a city that is given to you or allotted to you or set aside for you so that anyone, v'hayala nus, anyone can escape to, shama, there, kol rotzeach, anyone who has killed someone. Rotzeach is a murderer. But in this case, this is not a city for a murderer, this is a city for a manslaughterer. So you're going to have 3 cities, one in each third of your land, so that it's easy for someone to get to that city no matter where they live. That was the idea. And in fact, someone, I think it was Rashi, who says that there would be signs placed along the way showing where the city was. And it would say, the signs would say something like, flee, flee, and with an arrow pointing to the city. So now comes along the 3rd verse. And again, the Torah is concerned that these cities are equidistant so that everybody, no matter where they live, has easy access to one of them. Tachin lecha haderech, once again, measure out the land, measure out the distance. Wait a second. We just read that. We're on 4. V'zed davar harotzeach. And this is the case of the manslaughter. This is the situation concerning the manslaughter. Asher yanus shama v'chai. That he may escape to this place and live. Because, in ancient times, someone killed someone else, and the family of the victim would rise up and exact justice by taking vengeance on the murderer. And it would be a Hatfield and McCoy thing for generations. They would be fighting against each other forever, trying to get rid of the stigma of the original murder. So this is the matter concerning the manslaughterer. Asher yakeh et re'ehu, who hit or struck or smote his neighbor, his friend, bivli da'at, unwittingly, without intention, bli da'at, without knowledge, without planning, accidentally. V'hu lo soneh, lo mitmol shilshom, and he does not hate him. There was no cause for him, for enmity, for hatred between the two of them ever in the past. Tmol shilshom is an interesting expression. It's the short form of etmol, which means yesterday, and shilshom, which means 3 days ago or three's day ago. So tmol shilshom is a shorthand version of saying yesterday or forever back, forever in the past. So it's just v'hayalo sonelo. He did not hate him ever in the past. Shmuel Yosef Agnon, the poet, the laureate, not the poet, but the writer laureate of Israel, wrote one of his 7 novels, or one of his 7 volumes, is called Tmol Shilshom. which translated into English as yesterday, or yesterdays, I think. Anyway, so this is the case of the manslaughterer who may flee there and live, one who has killed another unwittingly without having been his enemy in the past. Okay, so we get to verse 5. This goes fairly quickly because it's sort of, it's not really very intense. Va'asher yavo et re'ehu. So this verse starts with the word va'asher. Anytime a verse starts with the v, it's a continuation of the verse that came before it in thought, not necessarily sentence-wise, but in thought. It's continuing the theme of what went before it. So you could read va'asher not just as that, T-H-A-T, but you could read it as, for instance, here's an example. Va'asher. Here's, I just said if you kill someone unwittingly and you never really hated him in the past, so you'll go to this city. And now, va'asher. I'll give you an example. Yavo et re'ehu. He went, and the word et is inappropriate here. It really should be eat. He went with his friend. Yavo eat re'ehu. To have it say et means that this is a direct object. And I don't know how you'd have a direct object as after the word and he went. And he went, his friend. That makes no sense. So, and he went with his friend. There are just too many dots under the aleph. He went with his friend, b'ya'ar, into a forest, right? Ya'ar is a forest. Lachtov eitzim, to cut down wood. Winter is coming. I'm going to go chop wood. Vanidcha yado bagarzen, and he picked up the axe, the axe, the garzen, the axe, and he picked up the axe, lichrot ha'etz, to cut or chop the wood, v'nashal ha'barzel, and the axe head, the barzel, the iron head of the axe, nashal, flew off min ha'etz. It flew off of the wood, of the handle, right? You got eights chopping down wood, but you've also got the wooden handle of the axe, of the barzel, of the garzen. And matzah et re'ehu vamet. So the head of the axe flew off and found his neighbor, and he died. An interesting way of saying matzah. So it struck his name. This is matzah to find, not matzah for Passover. Matzah for Passover is with a hey at the end, and matzah to find is with an aleph, but they sound exactly alike. And he died. Vahu, that is the one with the axe, Yanus el achat ha'arim ha'ele v'chai. And the one whose axe head slipped off, he shall run to one of those cities and live. So that's the whole deal with the cities of refuge, which were called Arei Miklat. And I think it's Rashi who says the word Miklat would be written on signs with arrows, either Yanus or Miklat, would be written on signs with arrows pointing the way to the city of refuge. So what do we think the city of refuge would be like? Would it be like a federal camp, like one of the federal easy term prison camps, as we have, we have two federal prisons on Santa Fe, not far from Fort Logan. One is the penitentiary, which has the barbed wire all around the top and 45 different practically strip searches to get in to go see a prisoner. It reminds me, I went about 20 years ago to conduct a Passover Seder at the penitentiary. I practically needed a passport to get in.
I was there. I went with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, so was I. I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You went in?
Yeah, we went in with you and Rabbi Kaye
Oh, right.
and a few other of us. It was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike's horseradish tasted better than theirs.
Well, yeah.
Well, of course it did, but yeah, unfortunately, I didn't make it to there.
Yeah.
It was interesting because I think we went from medium to less than medium to the cabins outside. It was interesting, yeah.
Yeah, and fortunately, we had Temple Sinai members in both places, so it was okay. So we went to the camp, which is right next door, and that's, open doors, and go ahead. You want to run, go ahead, run. You want to walk. You could probably walk outside of the door because the door was open. I mean, there was no guard there. The door was open. And there was a big meeting room, which I guess served as the lunchroom as well. And you could visit with the prisoner right in the lunchroom, and there were tables and chairs and easy visit. And then we just walked out. We just walked out the door and walked to the parking lot. And the prisoner could have come with us, except that he would have been missed sooner or later. Then he got to go and sit in the other prison for a while.
Yeah, I remember the priest followed us around, and he really didn't like the joke you said about going out and letting the prisoners search for the Hamantash, and I forget the name of the road out there.
The Afikoman. I said, what if I put the Afikoman like
Afikoman,
on the side of the street, right? And they all go to search for it, and he wasn't too pleased with that idea. But hey, what the heck? Yeah. So, the difference is that if you have to serve time, you should serve it in the camp, not in the prison, because the prison is just not a place anybody should be. The interesting thing is that the person that was serving time in the prison has passed away, Oliver Shalom. But the guy who was, I think, wrongly incarcerated in the camp did his time and is now out and about. And it always was a very nice guy who was just used by this corporation and served time instead of the CEO, who should have been the one behind jail.
Was that the box full of bricks?
Pardon?
Is that the box full of bricks case where they were selling selling things to businesses, but there was nothing in the boxes, just bricks.
No.
And they were trying to sell them printers and stuff, computers.
No, this was a corporation that was bilking people, and this guy was looking for a job. They hired him and they made him treasurer of the corporation, and his only job was to sign checks. He didn't even keep the books. He just signed checks. So therefore his name was on all the checks. and they put him in jail. Whereas the CEO was doing all the rest of the negotiation and made all the money. This guy made a salary and he signed checks and he served 3 years in jail. So, yeah.
Rabbi, I'm worried that another character is going to show up in your novel. The guy who signs the checks, and that's all he does.
I could add him, Anita, if you'd like.
The backstory would be interesting on the guy. You'd make up something because the guy has the public persona, and then he has what goes on behind closed doors persona. You could have a lot of fun with that.
So Anita, did you finish it yet?
No, not yet. I'm so sorry. Life has intervened, including Passover, I might mention.
Oh, okay, good deal. Okay, so now we know that this is one of the cities to flee to. The question is, what kind of a city was it? What was it? A big city? Was it a small place? Did it have streets? Were all the conveniences there? Did people live in bunks, in barracks? Did they live in houses? What was the nature of this, of the Arei Miklat, of the cities of refuge?
Which, was each city a refuge?
Yes.
Okay, so.
Didn't matter which one you went to.
Right, okay.
You know,
Okay.
it was like you had a health card, you could go to any hospital, but you usually went to the one closest. So,
Okay.
so this was, you know, you could go to anyone, but you usually went to the one nearby because you're walking.
Did you need to stay there, Rabbi? Did you need to stay there indefinitely? Because perhaps
You could leave at any time, but that was like, if you walked out of the city, you were fair game.
Exactly. Did your family accompany you? How would you have provided for yourself and your loved ones?
Well, Talmud says that your family could come and live with you
But where?
in the city of refuge.
Again, one needed resources. So you're running around with your credit card with a high limit on it. And so you could just buy another house and figure out a way to support yourself. I just see complications.
You see many complications because it was, these are essentially innocent people who, because of no fault of their own, have done something that you can't really apologize for. I mean, there's no way to make amends for what you've done. It happened, but you didn't mean it to happen. You didn't want it to happen. And so therefore, you want to protect yourself and you want to live. If your family wants to join you, fine, but otherwise your family may not have the resources to join you. They may have some means of taking care of themselves in the previous home. They may not want to abandon their house. And so maybe you were on your own.
And maybe you weren't taking care of your axe. I mean, should you have noticed that it was just a little wobbly and taken it to the axe repair person so it didn't fly off?
Well, that's why it's called an accident.
Exactly.
That happened to me with an old golf club. My father was trying to teach me to play golf. And I took this apparently beautiful swing. And I was just left holding a little piece of the handle of, anyway.
Yeah, well, and if you'd have hit somebody with that little piece, you'd have been teed off.
Well, no, the whole thing flew off. I was just holding the little handle.
Oh,
that would be a
no, my father managed to avoid the missile.
I picture it as being like a kibbutz, where you go to the city, the refuge city, and everything is going to be provided for you as long as you're willing to work. Like you can go today to a kibbutz and live there.
Yeah, yeah. And I would imagine that this was indeed the original kibbutz model.
I agree.
Because otherwise, how would these people live? They can't be on their own because otherwise they starve to death. So I was thinking exactly that. Now, you realize that the kibbutz movement in the 70s and 80s was on the downswing, right? Kibbutzim were not going out of business, but the number of people going to live in kibbutzim was less than the number of people leaving kibbutzim to go live in the cities. And suddenly, from out of nowhere, the kibbutzim are growing exponentially as many people are starting to go back to kibbutzim and to live and to work because if the kibbutz life is a whole lot better than a dog eat dog kind of make a living in the city if the truth be known. And kibbutzim are in the best part of the country. The weather is great. It's beautiful. The air is fresh. And if you don't care about owning anything or having any personal property whatsoever, then kibbutz life can be very nice. You work a certain amount of time in a certain job, and then you have nothing else that you have to be responsible for, right? If you're not a kitchen worker, you don't have to clean up the dishes. That's done by the kitchen worker. If you're taking care of the lemon trees, you don't have to worry about the orange trees. You're just the lemon tree guy or gal. If you work in the nursery, you just take care of little children, and at the end of the day, you dump them off on their parents, and you go back. You go back to your house.
How does that all differ from a moshav then?
Moshav, you own your house, so you're responsible for your home, and you can keep all the personal property in the house, but you have to take care of it. So you do your own laundry and all that stuff, and you do your own cooking, but you share all of the external stuff. You share the equipment, you share the farming equipment, and you might also help each other with the sowing and the reaping and the gathering and the selling so it's an external commune, but you own internally what's yours. So moshav is a little bit more complicated because of the private property aspect of it. Whereas a kibbutz, nothing is private. Ricky lived on a kibbutz for a better part of a year during the army and right after the army. And the only thing she owned was a little Emerson transistor radio. And it picked up two stations, Kol Yisrael, the Voice of Israel, and something from Jordan, which was in Arabic. So she only listened to Kol Yisrael, but at least she got the news and they had music. So one day the head of the kibbutz came in and said, "Do you have a radio?" And she said, "Yeah, my aunt gave it to me, and I just listened to it, Kol Yisrael." "Well, you're not a senior member of the kibbutz and somebody else wants to use it." Ricky said, "Pardon me while I pack my few things. I will be leaving in the morning. Keep your hand off my radio." And that was it. That was it. Boom, gone. So, and that's the extent to which the kibbutzim essentially. But most of that was back in the 50s when kibbutzim were not as wealthy as they ultimately became. Today, if somebody had a transistor radio, well, what's a transistor radio? But if somebody had a transistor radio, the kibbutz would just say, everybody gets one. And they just go out and buy 600 transistor radios. You got an iPhone, you want iPhone, you got a Samsung, whatever you want, everybody gets one. So, because the kibbutz seem to have plenty of money, and they're doing quite well, especially since they got off of agriculture and got into manufacturing. So, for instance, Naot, which was one of the great apple farms of the Galilee, actually on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, decided, gee, we got cows and stuff, when lots of leather, we could make these great shoes, and we'll just call them Naot, nature shoes. And they started making them, and suddenly they went from a little apple farm to a mega $1 million industry selling shoes worldwide. So they don't, everybody wants a transistor radio. I think we can afford it now.
Did David ever consider going into a kibbutz when he was younger?
What? Who? Me?
David and our
David?
Yes.
If I consider to go to a kibbutz,
Yeah, when you were younger, was there any
yes,
idealism that
I did wanted to go and live in a kibbutz very much so, yeah. Yeah, my parents opposed that.
And that was it? They opposed it and you didn't go?
Yeah, I didn't go, no. I used to go to the some kibbutzim in the summer and volunteer, pick up fruits. And I loved the life there. It was so incredibly peaceful.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
I heard that's where all the cute girls went too.
Well, and I already have the kibbutz that I would like to live on. It's just gorgeous place. Kibbutz Hefziba. Her delight is in it. From the book of Isaiah. It's right in the middle of at the edge of the lower Galilee and the upper Galilee, and Mount Gilboa stares you in the eye, and Sachna Lake is walking distance from it, and the archaeological wonder of the world, Beit Alpha, is a part of the kibbutz, and has a huge refet, a huge barn, lots of cows and stuff. But the land inside, the housing is very nice, but it's just a gorgeous part of Israel. So if I was ever going to become a kibbutznik, and at my age, that is highly unlikely, that's probably where I would have wanted to go. Okay, any questions? Oh, David, which kibbutz would you have liked to have gone to?
Ramat David, I had some, when I was in the military, I had some people that I knew from there. And I got to be good friends with them. So they invited me there a few times. So this was after the military, after the army. But when I was a teenager, when I was in high school, I would go to different kibbutzim. One of them was Nachal Oz, near Gaza, near the Gaza border. Yeah. And I was considered going there. And one of the reasons I wanted to go to a kibbutz, I didn't want to live with my parents. My parents' house was too crazy, so I was just dying to go.
You know, some of the interesting things that come out of kibbutzim. Ricky has a distant cousin, ninth cousin, I don't know, who went to live in kibbutz. I think it was Sova, up not far from Haifa, And this this cousin became interested in roses and started growing roses of all kinds. And won national and international prizes for her roses. And you know, so if you're on a kibbutz, you know, and you have a specialty like this, the kibbutz is more than happy to encourage that specialty because, you know, it lends honor and a name to the kibbutz as well. So for sure.
That was one that was well known for having good Passover Seders because it was the Harosas kibbutz.
The Harosas kibbutz?
Harosas.
Oh, Harosas. Harosas. Right.
Oh.
Harosas. And then there's the Nerozes kibbutz, where everybody goes around eating charoset with a tick. What can I tell you? Oh, who was it? I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt, who was given the honor of having a rose named after her, called the Eleanor Roosevelt. And so somebody took her to where they were growing Eleanor Roosevelt roses and asked her what she thought of them. And she said, I love the color, but I hated the sign that they posted. And the reporter said, what was the sign they posted? And she said, the sign said, very good against the wall, not very good in a bed.
I don't believe that.
I have no idea why Eleanor Roosevelt, but that was the deal. What can I tell you?
Oh.
Yeah, Anita, you're muted.
Has this idea of city of refuge ever exported anywhere else or at another time period? I mean, it's such an intriguing idea, and you could think it really might work super well, or it could be a big flop.
Boulder has a sanctuary city.
Well, and churches have long been places of refuge.
Churches you can go in, yep, find refuge.
And governmental embassy offices.
Yes, those two.
The big island of Hawaii had it, was a refuge place.
Is there any book on the topic? Any sort of definitive book, like especially the Boulder one? That's intriguing.
I'm sure there is. I'm sure there is. I remember Trump tried to do something with the sanctuary cities, tax them or close them or something. I don't remember. Or both. Right. Whatever would have really hurt them.
Yeah. The original idea of sanctuary comes from the word holiness. So the original sanctuary was literally the horns of the altar. And a person who had done something and wanted to, remember when we used to play like tree tag? You could be tagged at any time unless you were holding onto a tree or something. Well, this was sort of the idea. You could not be harmed as long as you were holding on to one of the horns of the altar. And altars were built with essentially four horns on the edges. And you could grab onto one or both or two on any side. And you would claim sanctuary, the right of being holy, as long as you held on to them. But there were also laws that were passed that said somebody, if they had done an egregious thing, could be torn from the altar and taken away. And it's like a filibuster. How long can you hold on to the horns of an altar? Right? How long can you speak on your feet? So, yeah. All right, people, listen, I hope that it will be a very easy and a sweet Passover for everybody.
Same to you.
And hopefully this will be our last Zoom Passover for a while. We're ending our Seder tonight, not with the words next year in Jerusalem, but next year in person. So I'm hoping that next year it'll all be in person. We're having one other couple with us tonight and Zooming with the rest of the family. So, and if everybody gets their shots, that's sort of Ali oxen free also. That'll be nice. So have a happy Passover, and
may your cups overflow with sweetness and blessings.
Halavai.
Halavai.
Mazel tov on the naming of your granddaughter. May she indeed be a nace or a nisa gadola.
Thank you.
Miracle baby for you and your family.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom, Chag Sameach, everybody.
Chag Sameach. Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye, all.